Hello, my name is Julianne. I'm an astrologer. We have a full moon coming up on July 10th of 2025. And in this video, I'm going to talk about four main points that I am very curious about and thinking about. And so let's dive into each of these points quickly here. So the first one is that I think this full moon will each and every one of us have a sense that there is a success, there is like a goal that we can meet by the time of this full moon that helps each of us dissolve who we think we are. So, identity is a really big part of this full moon and the transformation of that identity. That comes from the fact that the full moon is ruled by um, the planet Saturn. This is a full moon in Capricorn with Saturn as its ruling planet. And Saturn at this time is in a balsamic conjunction to the planet Neptune. This, in short, means that structures are dissolving and our sense of identity is dissolving between now and April 2026. So I'll get more into that in a moment here, but just to go through the three other points. The second is that the past is present at this full moon and it is ready to be worked with. And I see this because the full moon is in a trine configuration to both the South Node and the planet Mars in the sign of Virgo. So this is an Earth trine with the moon in cardinal Earth, which is Capricorn, and Mars in the South Node in Virgo, which is mutable Earth. And so I will get into this in a moment and why this reflects to me that the past is ready to be worked with. Like there is a fruition from our past that is helping us out in the present. The third key thing that I want to bring up is that this full moon is kind of the signal that we are entering a season of relationship liberation. And that's because Venus in Gemini at the time of this full moon is approaching a pretty strong square to the same Mars and Uranus that I just spoke to. And these planets, Venus and Mars, are the relationship planets, our inner relationship with ourselves, as well as how we relate to people outside of ourselves in every sense of the word relationship. And this square, this last quarter square, is a configuration of tension and pressure that ultimately pushes us towards liberation. The second reason I think this full moon will be a signal for this chapter change that's beginning is that Uranus will have just moved into the sign of Gemini. And why I'm putting this in the relationship area is because Uranus will leave the sign of Taurus, thereby freeing up Taurus for all of us for the first time since 2018. And I'll get more into that once I get to this. But just to finish up here, the final reason or the final thing that I'm really interested and curious about is the perspective that this full moon is really activating the soul of the human collective towards compassion. And this is not something that I talk about very often on my channel, this idea of the collective soul. But I've recently been attuning more to the north and south nodes of other planets. And so I'll delve into this very briefly later on in the video, but not like every single planet has a north and a south node. So maybe you're familiar with the lunar nodes, which are the north and the south node that you see most people talking about online, but every single other planet also has a north and a south node, which means that every other planet is coming from somewhere and is going from somewhere, and we can read that in the context of the astrology chart. And so this full moon is really illuminating, just as one example here, the north and the south nodes of the planet Pluto, which move enormously slowly. Like I'm talking multi-centuries. It takes really long time, and that length of time speaks to kind of what we've been up to as a species, as a consciousness, and our core motivations there with Pluto. So if that sounds interesting, let's hop into each of these one by one. So, all right, the first one here is really kind of the most surface level perspective that I have on this full moon. And it's this idea that I mentioned, right? Success will likely come at this full moon. It's a full moon in Capricorn. It's a full illumination of Capricorn, which is the commitment we have to our own legacy, the social impact that we have on the world. And it is the integrity of the structures upon which we stand and within which we live. And so when we have a full moon happen in the sign of Capricorn, there is, generally speaking, an emotional alignment between the work we are doing and our emotional health. Every full moon in Capricorn is different, but this year I would say it's relatively well aspected. And the one, you know, piece here, the biggest thing that I see isn't even really an aspect, although I'll get into the trining to Mars aspect in the next section, but there's this larger looming idea at this full moon, and that has everything to do with Capricorn, which is our work and our mission in life or our goal within this life itself, like how we're actually showing up in the world and committing to a long-term process that takes time to do something. Um, and so I look to Saturn, which is the planetary ruler of this full moon. And Saturn is in the sign of Aries, and it is making a conjunction to the planet Neptune, which is also in Aries. At this time, Neptune has just gone retrograde, so there's a lot of focus. Saturn itself is, soon to go retrograde at this point too. So Saturn is moving very, very slowly while it's not exactly retrograde at this time. Saturn is moving very, very slowly. And so what that means is we are pulled in our focus because the planet's not moving at its normal pace, which means that the function in our life is not also going at a normal pace. And so all that means to me is that we are really zeroing in, looking at our like long-term plans in life and not from anyone else's perspective, but from our own internal perspective with Aries. But not just that, right? Like because this planet, Saturn, which is our boss in a sense, but it's our actual spiritual boss, which is ultimately and always ourselves and our connection to um, all that is, to God, to whatever consciousness you want to think about. But this is making a conjunction to Neptune, and it's in its ending phase of this conjunction to Neptune, which is called a balsamic conjunction. And what that means, how I read it, is that we are completing a very large cycle in our lives. We are quite literally dissolving, which is a Neptune word. We are dissolving our identity. And so that rulership of this idea of a dissolving structure of identity, which, as I mentioned, is going to play out all the way up until April of 2026. But because we are having this Capricorn full moon now, and it's a very, like, emotions are really present. We have Jupiter in the sign of Cancer at this full moon. We are more deeply in our authentic emotional bodies than I think we've been in a really long time, which means we're showing up to our work in a way that we haven't in a really long time because we have this sense of coherence. However, the coherence isn't necessarily one that we are so excited to see grow for the next 30 years, right? The structure itself is dissolving. So whatever success is showing up is either happening in two ways. From my perspective, it's either something that affirms and like allows you to feel confident about the fact that your identity is dissolving, but that's okay. Or you might be trying and trying to build something up. And this full moon might show you that you can't use the same structure to build right now that you might have tried to in the past, because the whole logic of the times right now is to dissolve and to collapse the identity that you thought that you were before. Do you see where I'm getting at? So, success that helps you dissolve who you think you are. This is because the full moon is ruled by Saturn in the sign of Aries, making a balsamic conjunction to Neptune in the sign of Aries. So that's the biggest thing I see. I definitely see success, but this is not a normal type of like worldly success. This is an inner attunement to the work that you need to do in order to unbecome yourself, right? In order to kind of go back to ground zero and start again. So that's the first thing I see. The second piece here is about Mars. Um, and Mars is the planet that actually rules this Saturn-Neptune conjunction that I'm speaking to here, which is so integral for this idea of dissolving that I see happening at this full moon. Mars right now is in the sign of Virgo, and Mars in Virgo has everything to do with identifying yourself, knowing yourself, and specifically seeing your behaviors and your literal actions as a tool for the divine, as a tool for the logic, like for higher consciousness, for higher love, for higher awareness to like move you. And I want to be very clear here. I don't mean that we are like not having free will here. I mean that we see and we attune and we co-create with Mars and Virgo. Um, we take responsibility for it. Absolutely. I am in no way saying, and I really don't believe that when we think we just get messages from on high or that we channel something, that it's like nothing to do with us. We have responsibility 100% of the time to co-create, and therefore it is a co-creation. We are not just being used by something outside of us. So when I say this idea, Mars and Virgo, that we are like our life is a ritual for the thing that we really, really believe in, like the unspeakable truth of love, however that fits for you, right? Whatever you're devoted to, Virgo is devotion, Mars is action. And so we are acting out of devotion at this time. And Mars is in a trine to the moon. And so there's this devotional action that allows us to kind of feel the structure within our own body, moon in Capricorn, feel the structure of our own life and home and the real work that we're here to do and actually act on it and build it. And like, there's a real emotional opportunity here to feel the alignment in your everyday movement and action um, with your heart. The piece here around the past being present is because the South Node is right there with Mars. This conjunction between Mars and the South Node is tightening throughout the next few weeks. And anywhere the South Node is, I read it very simply as the past is present. I do not read the South Node as a negative or a decrease or a place to let go necessarily. I see it as a place where there is a reflection and an indication that the past is present. With Virgo, with the South Node in Virgo, our habits from the past are present. Our devotional practices are present. The ones that we've had for a long time are present. Maybe our ancestral devotional practices. And that also means the habits and the practices which are not helpful, including the ones that are helpful. So it's not so cut and dry for me. And what this means is that we have resources, we have access to habits and behaviors, and we have an environment to actually act on these habits that we are familiar with Mars making, forming this conjunction to the South Node. And it's in this trine to the full moon, which says there's something about our past that we are taking action on, something about our devotional practice that is, you can say it's being activated by the full moon, by this full awareness. You can also say that the behaviors themselves are helping us to gain greater emotional clarity on our purpose, if that makes sense. Like our more long-term purpose, the purpose that we see dissolving now. Um, yeah, there's a few more layers here that I'm not going to put on the screen, but I'll mention Virgo right now. So Mars and the South Node are ruled by the planet Mercury, which is in the sign of Leo. On its face, this means that we are taking action on our creative outlook on life. Mercury in Leo is about how we make sense of our own creative impulse. So Mars and the South Node is about how we communicate our creative impulse now, and then how we take action based on the logic Mercury of our own creative impulse, Leo. But something important to note is that Mercury is in its pre-retrograde shadow right now, which means that we are entering a longer season of reconnecting to our voice, our creative voice. So that is very present at this time too. All right, the third piece here also has to do with Mars, but also has to do with Venus. So let's look at that. I quite simply here stated that relationship liberations begin. Generally, I think that the full illumination of this work, of this passion, of the emotional alignment or coherence between what we know we need to do, like as a job, or what we know we need to do to structurally create safety for ourselves, Moon in Capricorn, through this dissolving process. Um, the full illumination is actually bringing to light some relationship dynamics, which we are just going to become aware of after the full moon. We're just going to begin to sense from this full moon moving forward, we're going to begin to sense an inner tension, an inner restlessness that ultimately will want to be resolved. There will want to be a decision made, and this will be an internal decision because what I'm speaking to here is a third quarter square between the planets Venus and Mars. So we talked a lot about Mars on the South Node with Virgo, in Virgo on the South Node, and Venus at this time is newly into the sign of Gemini, but it's made its way into sign of Gemini, 6 degrees, and it's on its way. It's within 10 degrees now of that last quarter square between Gemini and Virgo. These are the mutable signs, and they're both ruled by Mercury. So they're both, again, this returns to how we are able to express our creativity, how we're able to like communicate our heart in a way. The Leo heart is the bright creative impulse. And at this time, with this square forming, the full moon might begin to show us where we are ready to let go of the structures. That last quarter square signifies a shift out of out of being well established in something. It's the final shift. At the last quarter square, we move from the archetype of like Capricorn and we shift into the archetype of Aquarius and we say, how am I now ready to decondition everything that I just worked for? And everything that we've just worked for in context of this square between Venus and Mars, the cycle between Venus and Mars began in 2024. I believe it was in early 2024. And so something began in early 2024 that we are finally um, growing out of now. There was a relationship that likely was very important, very intense, because that conjunction between Mars and Venus happened at the very first degrees of Aquarius, very close to Pluto, which had just moved into the sign of Aquarius. So there was a very intense relationship, a very keen sense of the ending of a relationship or the ending of a social connection that now Venus and Mars have played this out over the last, year and a half. And we are coming to a point where we've learned a lot. And now we realize, wow, I need to allow myself to get even bigger. I need to break away from this relationship, for example. This last quarter square is known as a crisis of consciousness. So it's an internal shift where we're being pushed to shift our own awareness and our own outlook on relationships at this time. And it's not only that, right? Um, the square itself and the building up to this exact square, which will be later in July, that shows growing tension. But something else that feels really significant to me about this is that Uranus will have just moved out of the sign of Taurus. And I'm not going to talk about Uranus in Gemini right now, but I'm going to talk about the absence of Uranus in Taurus and why that speaks to this relational shift. Uranus in Taurus has had each of us rethinking our values since 2018. Taurus is the internal sign of Venus, which means that it is where we establish, where we know what resources we have access to on our own. It's where we are self-reliant. From the place of our own sense of self-reliance, we begin to project outwardly onto others in order to get needs met that we cannot, or that we perceive that we do not have access to meeting those needs on our own. When Uranus has been in Taurus, our access to our own self-reliance has been very unstable. And I do think that that means relationships have been quite unstable since 2018. There has been major shifts. It doesn't mean that you can't have a successful relationship. Many people have successful relationships throughout this whole time, but it means that the field of Taurus, the inner security paradigms of people generally, have not been stable. But at this full moon, suddenly Uranus is out of Taurus, and we have this full moon in another earth sign, Capricorn. The earth is like finally stable, and we have this full illumination in the earth signs of what stability finally looks like after, 7 or 8 years of shaking up the very ground that we are on, which means that, from my perspective, we are tuned back in to our own internal resources at this full moon in a way we have not been since 2018, which means that we are now projecting a whole different set of needs onto other people, which means that the established relationships, the established ways in which we are getting our needs met through relationships to other people will also change. And I think that it is that shift that just coincides with the symbology of this third quarter square between Venus and Mars that says, it's nothing bad, but it's just time to up level. It's time to shift. You have changed on the inside. Uranus through Taurus has changed Taurus. You have changed. Your values have changed. It's time to play that out, liberate yourself. Um, but the square and this new shift, this is still a square, right? This is still tension filled. This is still inner turmoil. This is still moments of uncertainty and a lot of fear, because when you shift out of the past, you lose access to everything you had. You lose access to the community. You start thinking new things. You don't know if your community is going to accept them. And so a lot is on the line. You have to place your faith into something much greater than yourself and in your belief that that is also you, and that there will be other people that you meet from this perspective, from this wider perspective. So that's been on my mind a lot. The final thing that I want to bring up here is kind of out there. It's kind of out there. But it's my perspective here that this full moon across the Cancer Capricorn axis is really clearly activating the soul of the human collective towards compassion. Okay, why do I say that? So, the soul, as we understand it in evolutionary astrology, is associated, represented by the planet Pluto. And individuals have souls. The collective has a soul. The earth has a soul. Our whole moment of time has a core motivation. And that's where Pluto is at any moment. But it had to come from somewhere, right? It doesn't just emerge. Even the deepest motivation, the deepest desire comes from somewhere. And that's where we look to the nodes, the planetary nodes of Pluto. And if you see here, the nodes of Pluto have been in the Capricorn Cancer axis for hundreds of years, and they'll be there for at least another 100 years. This means that our entire generation and generations before us and generations to come are working with the Cancer Capricorn paradigm on a deep level that transcends each and every one of our human lives and unites us in this like energy field of Cancer Capricorn. In this case, we have the South Node in Capricorn and the North Node in Cancer. North Node in Cancer is about going towards compassion. Generally, as a humanity, we want to move towards compassion. That is the deepest desire. We are coming from, with the South Node, we are coming from a place of structure. And with Pluto, that structure was like, this is a very classic archetypal reflection of the patriarchy. So, right, masculine, Capricorn is very interesting because it's actually a feminine sign. It's a yin polarity, but we live in a world that equates work with men, right? And power with work, right? Power Pluto, money Pluto. Money is also a Capricorn thing. These are all, and masculinity for whatever reason over the last, I don't even know, long period of time, we are evolving collectively out of the patriarchy, but it's very clearly here, right, with the South Node, and we are evolving towards Cancer with Pluto and the deep recognition, the deep power of the Cancer, which is archetypally the abyss, archetypally the feminine, archetypally the womb, um, the space of all creation that can be created. And we see at this full moon happening at 18 degrees of Cancer, it's only a few degrees away from this nodal axis of Pluto. And so I think at any Cancer Capricorn season, really of our whole lives, this is just a larger theme that I wanted to share because I think it provides like possibly the biggest context that we can possibly get astrologically, from where we're coming from and where we're going from the perspective of the deepest motivation of humanity. And this has to be vague, but we're going from Capricorn and going to Cancer. And the moon being on that south node says there's, again, more reason here. We're illuminating what's actually present right here and right now, which in the context of our times is dissolving. Um, with Pluto in Aquarius right now, humanity is changing. The expression of humanity is changing with Saturn, the ruler of this Capricorn area in Cancer, or Saturn in Aries, moving to that dissolving conjunction with Neptune. It's like we have to be able to let ourselves time travel a bit and be a structure for change, if that makes sense. Be accepting and present to all of the past here and to know that it's not just our generation that is in this paradigm. Like I said, it's going to take hundreds of years for this nodal axis of Pluto to shift out of the Cancer Capricorn axis. And even then, it's just going to go to a next one. And so this is really changing what we're doing, I think, as a humanity. Pluto and Aquarius, we're not here to meet goals, make a bunch of money, and die, right? We're not. That's not why we're here. That might have been the structure through which we've been doing things for a really long time, but we're not doing that anymore. And I think the reason that becomes really clear at this full moon, um, firstly, because we can tap into the like very primordial truth of this collective movement in our evolution. Like we are going towards compassion, we are going towards growth, we're going towards like love, and compassion is just the best Cancer word in my opinion here. But again, the reason I think, if this is making sense to you, is because we have a new ruler of Pluto by the time that this full moon starts or perfects. We have Pluto being ruled by Uranus in Gemini, no longer Uranus in Taurus. So Uranus in Gemini, things are getting really quick, really quick. Things are getting liberated really quick. Our minds are changing. Data becomes super intelligent. And I don't just mean AI, I mean our own minds. I mean, we're going to start talking differently. We're going to start thinking differently. We're going to start treating our words so differently. And this full moon like illuminates the beginning of all of it from my perspective. But it illuminates like the beginning of this dissolving process more than anything. Not only of ourselves, our identity structures, but also our relationships. And really, the next year, we are in this process of dissolving, but this full moon, because it's on this axis, Pluto's north and south node, and you can see Saturn's north and south node are also the same as Pluto and Pluto's north and south node. structurally, from a for perspective of desire, we are moving away from Capricorn and we are going to Cancer. Capricorn is very present. Cancer, Cancer is the vision. Cancer is the vision, and that's a very long-term vision. It's a vision that outlives you and I. But at this full moon, I think it's one that we will be able to just feel in our bones as everything begins to shift in our minds, as we also feel the structural reality like actually end, actually dissolve. Confront that, allow it to happen. From April 2026 onwards, we're building again. We're building a new dream again. So that's it. That's what I think. Let me know if you agree with me. I really very much so believe in what you think over what I think. My goal is for my words to create a resonance that you get to decide what to do with. If you like the way I approach this, I offer one-on-one readings on Zoom. And this whole month of July, I have a promotion running. I have a few slots for half-priced readings. That's like my full reading at half price. So if you would like to book a session with me, I would love to meet you. I'd love to work with your chart. I'd love to talk to you about all of this. But that's all. Definitely let me know what you think. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. And until the next one, bye.